You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, with the spotlight on section hikers.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers, and I am your host, Julie Jester Gayheart. This week, I'm starting off the show with a little throwback to 2006 when I first started section hiking. I remember I loved reading trail journals, blog entries on whiteblaze.net, diaries of other hikers out on the trail, articles from organization newsletter, and basically anything I could get my hands on to read about trails. Somewhere along the way, I got away from reading and turned more to watching, mostly because of the rise in social media sites over the years. But I want to do a little more reading and sharing from those that have documented through writing. I'm working on an idea for some future episodes, and I'm hoping to find some section hikers from various trails who have documented their journey in written form that wouldn't mind me reading that on the podcast and then coming on the show. More specifically, I'm looking for section hikers who have maybe written a book about their hike, documented their section hike on trailjournals.com, kept their own journal, has a well-written blog, or written for trail organizations, been published in newsletters, or really anything unique in writing. So if you or you know of any section hikers from various trails that have their journey in written form, and either you or someone you know wouldn't mind sharing that on the podcast, please have them reach out to me via email at jester@jestersectionhiker.com, or you can send me a DM over on Instagram at jestersectionhiker. Today, you're going to hear from our final member of Jester's class of 2022 section hikers, Chris Armstrong. And for the final time in this series of episodes, here's a little more about Chris from his own written bio. Chris grew up in Ohio, navigated his way through Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Explorer Scouts, where he developed his passion for the outdoors. His first backpacking trip was in 1974 through the Cumberland Gap with the American Youth Hostels, otherwise known as AYH. He graduated college and moved to North Georgia Appalachian foothills in 1990. Continuing there with his love for whitewater kayaking, mountain biking, competitive triathlon, marathoning, and backpacking, and as he says, yada, 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 passion in a location where he didn't really have a lot of drive for days to find decent locations. Got married in Georgia in 1992 to a gal with some similar interests, and they were always thinking they'd someday move out west. Well, they managed that in 2000 when Chris and his gal moved to the foothills of the Sierra outside of Sacramento, and they've never looked back. Since then, they've chased water up and down the state with their whitewater kayaking and then jumping into longer distance trail running and spending many hours on their road and gravel bikes. However, the trail and backpacking calls out to them the loudest. Other than a multitude of 2 to 4 day trips throughout the Sierra, most recently they hiked the Tahoe Rim Trail in 2020, took Chris's 40-year-old nephew from Florida, who had never been camping before, on a 4-day trip from Cottonwood Meadows to the summit of Mount Whitney, and yes, he still talks to them, to last year when Chris went solo hiking from Kennedy Meadows south to Belden to hike, see, and experience the entirety of the Sierra from the perspective of the Pacific Crest Trail. Unfortunately, the Caldor fire closed the trail in most every national forest in California, causing Chris to leave the trail last year at Reds Meadows, just outside of Mammoth. So his lash this year is to complete that trip starting back at Reds Meadows. Thanks for coming back for another episode, everybody. And now on to Chris Armstrong. All right, you guys, welcome back to the podcast. And after many technical difficulties and headphone changes, I'm excited to have our last remaining member join us for Jester's class of 2022 section hikers. And without any further ado and any more technical difficulties, my co-pilot of this episode, Chris Armstrong. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Julie. Hey, it's good to be with you.
Yes, and you sound, like I said earlier, just a second ago, we have been through, I don't know how many headphones have we been through, Chris?
This is probably number 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Well,
and listen, the Rosetta Stone headphones were the winner, right?
Right. And if I'm your last guest, why should I be easy, right? This should be really difficult if I'm your last guest. So I'm glad I can be a challenge for you, Julie.
Well, excellent. Well, you're not my last guest overall. You're my
Sure.
last guest of this series of shows. Yes, but you're the last.
Got it.
Save the best for last, right?
Well, I don't know about that. We'll see.
One thing I failed to mention to you, Chris, is at all the beginning of these episodes, I've been reading everybody's bios. So the guests that are listening now have a little bit of a taste of who you are and what you've been up to over the years. But I really want to kick this episode off because you did something really awesome back in 2000. So a lot of us, you could talk to your friends and we're hanging out with people and other hikers. And it's like, oh, in the future, I'm going to do this. Or in a couple years, I'm going to move here. Or in a few years, I'm going to thru hike. Well, back in the year 2000, you moved from the East Coast to the West Coast and you've never looked back. So talk us through that.
Well, it initially started living in Ohio and growing up in Ohio and being kind of an outdoorsy type person. And as you know, you're a former Ohioan.
I know, you got to get out of there as fast as possible.
The glaciers came through and flattened the state, and then we planted soybeans and corn, and that's about all that. Certainly, I don't want to disparage Ohio too much because southeastern Ohio really is beautiful. It's kind of in the foothills of the Appalachians. But truly, to be an outdoors person in Ohio, there's better places to be. So actually, after college, we moved to North Georgia and lived in the North Georgia foothills near a town called Waleska. So we would commute an hour every day to work in Atlanta and then drive back to Waleska outside of Canton, Georgia. And we lived there for 10 years and, kind of really dug our heels into the backpacking and, the Cuyahoga Wilderness and the Appalachian Trail and, enjoyed our stint there. But after, 10 years of that, and I don't know if there's some kind of romantic feel for an East Coaster to think, someday I want to live out West. Someday I'm going to do that. Well,
I think it is a romantic feel because all the sexy trails are out West. Come on, Chris.
Well, again, I don't want to disparage the East Coast, so there's certainly lots to be said for it, and the Appalachian chain. But the Appalachian chain is very, very old and ancient. So it's the mountains.
Oh, listen, all the AT hikers just left the show.
I know, right?
Old and ancient. There you go. I'm kidding.
The mountains are rounded and eroded. I mean, certainly the whites are very dramatic, but the grandeur of the West, it's relatively undeveloped. I mean, that has a certain appeal for somebody that likes to be out in the wilderness. So my wife had an opportunity to take over the northwestern part of the country. And actually, we could have lived anywhere as long as we were close to an airport in the northwestern part of the United States. So we could have lived in Montana or Washington or Oregon or Wyoming. But, living in Ohio for 30 some odd years, we were just daggone tired of the winters. And not just the cold and the snow, but it's just gray. So, close to the Lake Erie, you get the lake effect. So just months and months of gray. So when we decided we could live anywhere in the Northwest, we picked Sacramento. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Certainly, 2 hours from San Francisco, 2 hours from the Desolation Wilderness, 2 hours from Tahoe, 3 hours from Yosemite. Just a lot of reasons, but primarily the weather. It's almost constant sunshine. So, yeah, we haven't looked back. We love living where we live. I've been to 49 states. I still have to get to Alaska, and I'm thinking I'm not going to Alaska until I can drive to Alaska. So I'm not going to fly there just to get
and
it.
spend some time there. Spend some good amount of time.
Yeah, but we've decided, there's no other place we'd like to live. And actually, we live on 15 acres in between Sacramento and Tahoe now. After retiring, we kind of moved up in the foothills. So we're happy as can be out here, and the adventures are endless.
And I can tell you guys, he is grinning from ear to ear, and I don't think he's ever looked back. And I'm an East Coast gal, and I'd love my Western North Carolina mountains, but there is, every time I go west, there's just something truly magical. And, not only the views and, a proper trail and a lot of things that I'm finding here on the East Coast, you're almost like walking in like a rock trough. It's just getting more eroded and overuse, and especially on some of the popular trails. And, what I have found on the East Coast is we don't deal with those fires and water issues that you guys have on the West Coast. And that's actually one of the things I want to talk to you about, because last year you spent some time, listen, you guys, Chris has been all over the Sierras, but last year you wanted to see it from a PCT's perspective, if I'm getting that right. So walk us through that.
Well, us hikers that like to watch YouTube videos and read books and listen to others certainly have heard the stories of all the classic passes in the Sierra, Muir Pass and Forester Pass. And, I wanted to experience that for myself. And I didn't, certainly I've done 3 or 4 day trips and seen one pass at a time and called it good. But I thought, I want to try to experience, without doing a through hike, what perhaps the length of the Sierra would be like. And was able to work it out. So, hey, I'm going to take a month, and I'm going to go from Kennedy Meadows south to Belden on the Feather River. So it'd be about 525 miles. And the reason I chose that was it's so easy to get a long-distance permit through the Pacific Crest Trail Association. So one permit, if it's over 500 miles, one permit takes care of everything. So I thought, well, there's my distance. I'm going to make sure it's 500 miles or greater. So I got my one permit, and it was early August, and left from Kennedy Meadows south and started my trek northbound. And there's some stories in there, of course, but...
of course.
Well, and I'll tell you real quick, I made 3 bonehead mistakes. And, my first backpacking trip...
Oh, we love mistakes. Tell us.
They're just bonehead. My first backpacking trip was in the mid-'70s, so I'm not new to backpacking. And... bonehead mistake number 1, before I left, everybody wants to know what the base weight is of their pack. So in the garage, I had my pack all packed up and was going to set it on the scale. And I realized, oh, shoot, I left my fuel canister in there. Let me take that out so I can make sure I get a true weight. So I got my base weight, but I neglected to put my fuel canister back in, which I didn't know. Bonehead, right? Which I didn't realize.
Bonehead mistake number 1. There you go.
I didn't realize it until night number 1. And, perhaps you're a stove user yourself. And there's
yes.
Yeah, there's something comforting about knowing, you get to camp, you get yourself set up, and you're going to cook yourself a hot meal. Oh, my God, Julie, to go through my pack and realize there is not a canister in here. And do you know how many times you can go through a pack looking for something, swearing that it's in there? And every time you look, it's still not there. But you keep looking,
devastating,
swearing it's in there. So I went 8 days without a stove or without being able to cook. And here's interesting. You hear about cold soakers. And you wonder, I wonder if I could do that. That would save some time. But, Julie,
no,
I can't do it. I got to the point where I would put my ramen, a couple hours before I got to camp in a couple Ziploc bags, of course, because I didn't have a cold soaking jar. I'd fill it with water to reconstitute the ramen. When I got to camp, I had a black base layer. So I set the black base layer up against a rock, and then my water bag full of ramen up against the black base layer to hopefully heat it up enough that I could get somewhat of a warm meal. And, it worked out okay. But you know what? You can't fake cold coffee in the morning.
No. I mean, I appreciate people that could do that, but I just look at it like this. I'm not pounding 20, 30-mile days where I need that much time. I mean, I like to get up. One of my favorite things to do is be in my tent and drinking coffee. Now, this might be at 5 a.m, but I'm going to do it.
Julie, you and I are aligned, and imagine not being able to do that. Well, here's what's interesting, too. A couple nights I camped near the same group of people. And the second night, once they realized my plight, offered to, boil my water for me. But you know what? I said, nope, I made my bed. I'm sleeping in it. I made this mistake. I'm just going to go cold. I'm just going to do it. And I hated every minute of it, Julie. So no cold soaking for me. No,
I'd have been like right over there, like handing out money. Like how much could I pay you for fuel? How much is that worth?
I just was going to live with my mistake. Real quick, the other two mistakes were...
Oh, I was going to say bonehead number 2.
Yeah, bonehead number 2. So I was leaving on August 3rd, and my wife is going to hike in Kearsarge Pass and resupply me so I didn't have to hike out. Great for her and great for me, right?
Oh, nice, yes.
So left on the 3rd. I was going to meet her on the 9th. So 3rd and 9th, that's 6 days. Oh, no, that's not 6 days. That's 7 days. So if you count 3rd, 4th, 5th, you count them up.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, here I'm counting on my fingers. 7 days, yeah.
Well... No, I'm leaving on the 3rd. I'll meet on the 9th. That's 6 days, right? 9 minus 3 is 6. Well, long story short, I ended up a day short of food. So I was out of food for a day. No. So I was just kind of bumming food on the trail. And of course, most people were happy to get me food because they brought too much. So I felt like, a saint to them because I was helping haul their food that they wouldn't have to take up Whitney, for example. So bonehead number 2. And bonehead number 3 was, I never planned a 0 until I got to Mammoth. So I was 15 days, Julie, before I even sat in a chair. 15 days before I saw a car. 15 days before I was even inside a structure. And it was fine.
Why do we do that to ourselves? What is that about?
It's about being a bonehead, Julie. I should have hiked out at Kearsarge, and not tried to stay on the trail. And I just never really thought about it. In 15 days, I'll see her in Mammoth, and I'll take a 0 there. But, I could do it again, but 15 days is just too many days to be on the trail without,
That's way too many days to be on the trail.
Well, and in the Sierra, too, you don't cross a road. You can go 15 days. You can go even longer, and you don't cross the road. I had no cell phone service for 15 days. So it was good.
No, could you have gone to Muir Trail Ranch? You could have gone down to...
I went to Muir Trail Ranch where I had mailed a resupply, but, there's nothing there. There's
what about VVR? I can't remember where that's at in relationship to Muir Trail. It's before, right?
If you're going northbound, it's a couple days after Muir Trail Ranch, but it's 6 or 7 miles off the PCT, and you can typically take a ferry. But last year, as well as this year, is a drought year, so the ferry wasn't even running. So and there was no reason for me. I was fine. I had my Garmin inReach, so I could text my wife, and everything was great. But just in retrospect, I didn't really need to be out there for 15 days without, like I said, even just sitting in a chair, or these comforts of home that you don't realize until you don't have them.
Yeah. Okay. So we've learned 3 valuable lessons, and we're going to get into, are you ready for this year's trip? But I guess ending out last year's trip, a fire took you off the Caldera. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The Caldera fire. It pretty much closed down the state of North Carolina. Not North Carolina, California, National Forest, everything, right?
Yeah, it was the Caldor fire. And
Caldor, okay.
Yeah, and it was up in the Tahoe area. And that fire was burning for a number of days, but it was getting worse and worse. And, I was heading into Mammoth. And Kathy my wife, was coming to resupply me and spend the night. And, like I said, we live in 15 acres in the Sierra foothills. And Kathy's not real jiggy with the whole fire scene. And being by yourself up here, had they not closed, and the Cowboy Fire is really close to us, had they not closed the national forest, I probably would have got off trail anyways, because it just wasn't fair for her to be home in the Sierra by herself with fires raging around. But the National Forest Service did close pretty much all the national forests in California, mainly because they're just short on manpower at this point. The wildland firefighters are struggling with multiple fires. It's post-COVID, hiring, et cetera. They just didn't have the manpower. So I fear this is a precedent for years to come. This is the first year, or last year was the first year I really remember them closing all the national forests basically in the whole state. So I fear that it's not just a fire thing, it's a manpower thing. So my fear is this year also, once, there's a couple, 3 or 4 fires going, that may happen again this year, even though there may not be fires in the area that you're in, you may not be able to recreate in the forests. We'll see. So anyway, August, I made 15 days, 225 miles to Mammoth, and then, got off. So decided, next year I got to get this thing finished. So I've got 300.
And that's where we are now.
That's where we are now. And I've got 300 and some odd miles to go. I've moved up the dates a month. So I'll leave very late in June. So I'll trade fires for mosquitoes. And I'll trade fires for some monsoonal, afternoon thunderstorms. But hopefully those two trade-offs will allow me to get this hike finished.
Well, I am keeping my fingers crossed that you are going to be able to finish your hike as well. But we all know, you can't ever count on anything. But I have a feeling you're going to be able to get that done. And I hope there are no fires that early, because I've been hearing, since it is a drought year and all that stuff, those fires might come early. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. We hear one thing over here on the East Coast, but do you think over the course of like now and going forward, is it going to be really hard for people to complete these trails, in the summer during fire season? Like, what's the word out in California and in that area?
Yeah, it's going to get more challenging. I mean, the worst is not over from that standpoint. So, what we really need are more average, whatever the heck average is anymore. But we need more average wet years. So the last 3 years, including this year, have been significant in their lack of rainfall, lack of snowfall. So that can certainly delay the fire season. That's not to say come October. October is a big fire season for us. It seems like that's getting late in the year. But typically most through hikers on the PCT, certainly those going northbound, are through the Sierra, they're into Oregon and Washington. Oregon has its share of fires. Washington, maybe a little bit less because of the moisture. So we really need our moisture back. We need our rainfall back, our snowfall back. And, listening to the climate scientists, we're going to have these whiplash seasons where we're going to have 3 or 4 years where we're just going to be really dry. And then we might have a couple, 3 years where it's incredibly wet. 2017 was a record snowfall year in the Sierra. 2019 was another, epic snowfall year in the Sierra. So I think that's what we're going to be expecting, listening to the climate guys, is we're going to have dry spells and that are going to be really dry and really hot. It's 100 degrees out right now. And it's June. It's early June. And we're going to have years where, we're going to have big snow years. So those of you planning PCT hikes, I mean, next year you could very easily have, 200% snowpack and really treacherous Sierra times and stream crossings that could be challenging. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, it does. It does. It's almost scary. How this stuff is happening.
I remember there's a major highway that runs up and down the east side of east side of the Sierra called 395. I say major highway. It's a 4-lane highway. I don't know if it's major, but I can remember 2017 driving that highway, seeing PCT through hikers hiking that highway, from Lone Pine through Bishop up to Mammoth, hiking on the highway, 200 miles to skip the Sierra. They didn't want to flip-flop for whatever reason. They just felt like, I need to do a continuous footpath, and the Sierra is impassable. So perhaps they're short on time. But seeing, PCT hikers hiking this 4-lane highway for hundreds of miles, really reflects the dichotomy of what we're seeing on any given year weather-wise.
And I hate that. I hate that for, not only the Sierra, but, the PCT footpath itself, the surrounding areas. And yeah, I guess we'll just wait to see, kind of what goes down this year after you're done, of course.
Well,
and
it's reality. Yeah, no, it's the reality. Yeah. And I think those of us that live here now have just come to accept it, and we have to find our workarounds. And in my case, the workaround is just leave earlier. And, a PCT hiker may at some point decide, I've got to do a road walk for 30, 40, 50 miles. And, I don't think that's uncommon now. People are getting off the trail and doing road walks on, some alternate route that they can get by the burn areas.
So going earlier, you mentioned this is a drought year, but there's still going to be runoff. I mean, it is the Sierra. So are you concerned with higher water crossings? And we might as well go ahead and address that as well, because that's something, unless you're in, New Hampshire, Maine area, the water crossings on the Appalachian Trail are typically no big deal. But I know water crossings specifically in the Sierra, sometimes in Oregon and up in, Washington, they could be a big deal, and they've caused deaths. Of people, maybe not knowing how to properly cross, or not knowing, I don't know what you call the undercurrent and things like that. So talk to us about these crossings, because I don't think we talk about the safety factor of that enough.
Well, briefly, in my case, in July, the water crossings will be inconsequential. The snow melt's done.
Good.
Right now, yeah. Even following some of the hikers via YouTube, the water crossings are not really a big challenge, right? Even right now, and we're recording this early June. So
yeah,
when it does come to the snowpack years, the water crossings are a challenge. There are techniques. Not unlike, self-arresting with an ice axe. There are techniques you need to practice and understand and be comfortable with. Same with river crossings. There are techniques that you need to become comfortable with. And, I don't know how you would practice that necessarily in your home state, but, there's certainly Ned Tibbetts, and maybe that's something you could link to, is a...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard that name before, but he's an incredibly...
No, I haven't, but... I feel like you're getting ready to tell us something significant, so I'm making sure I make a note here to Ned Tibbetts. Okay.
Yeah, he's an incredibly well-respected high country not survival in a literal term where you're a survivalist, but how to survive in the high Sierra, including river crossings. And he's got a number of... I don't want to say he's on YouTube. I've certainly listened to a number of podcasts about the technical aspects and the safety needs that you need to be aware of crossing rivers. And one of the simple things is don't cross by yourself. And if you're a solo hiker, which I am, that's my jam, is just being a solo hiker. If you come to a river crossing that you're not so sure about, you just sit and wait for others to come. And there are some techniques that you can buddy up, a 3-person hug, for example, and you just increase your stability trying to get across a stream when you now have 6 points of contact on the stream bed.
Yeah.
So, there's just one simple technique. You wait and cross with others. Another simple thing, during the heat of the day is when the snow is melting into the streams. So later in the day, you get the higher the streams are. So if you come to a stream that's raging and you're just not comfortable, and the thing to do is you're just gonna camp there for the night. Nightfall comes, snow longer is melting like it was during the day, and in the morning is typically when the streams are at their lowest. So, this is a critical skill, and I suspect those that are heading for something like the PCT or the CDT where these are issues, God, let's hope that they've done their research and understand some of the safety and technical aspects of stream crossing.
Well, I am going to make sure the gentleman's name you just told me is his website or YouTube or whatever it is going to be in the show notes, so people have that to reference as well. And I want to go back.
You, Julie. Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
I will.
Yes, that'll be great. So any information we could give people, I want to make sure we have it out there. So you're leaving in July or June, and you're picking back up, and you're going to complete your 500 miles. and you had 3 bonehead moves. So how have we taken care of those bonehead moves, and, how's our prep now as you're getting ready to head out?
Well, I'm 3 weeks out, so I really haven't pulled the backpack down, and I put this blue tarp. I put this blue tarp on the garage floor and just dump everything out and start from there. No, I'm comfortable in that. I don't need more than 3 weeks to get ready. You know what? I thought about it. I need to make a list, right, for packing, and that seems so parochial.
Check. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to make a list.
Check.
Yeah. I don't think I'll make those same mistakes again. I already know I won't. But, I need to make a list. And, also, for sure, and, I suspect people know this, I'm going to set my tent up, of course, before I pack it. There's a temptation to go, I put the tent away whenever it was and everything was fine. No, you need to set it up. Who knows what happened between now and then. I'll fire up the stove to make sure the stove still fires up. I'll do those kind of things. But, I thought I'll make a list. That's what I'm going to do, Julie. I'm making a list.
Or just get out a bunch of Post-it notes, which drive me insane. I don't know if I've ever said this. I can't stand Post-it notes. It's just like I want to rip it down. I want it to be done. Just take out 25 or whatever Post-it notes and write one thing on. And when you put it in, tear up the Post-it note. It'll make you feel good.
Right. Well, stay tuned. I think we're all on a trip of this length. There's going to be something that's going to go awry. Hopefully it's not something I have control over.
There's going to be something, and you're going to crack up. Yeah, you're going to crack up about it. And I want you to text me about it. I want you to send me, or whatever you get home, send me an email or something and say, bonehead move number 4.
Well, since you asked for our Instagram and our YouTube channels, I'm not a huge social media person, but now, because you've asked for it, and I suspect you'll put it in the show notes, and maybe somebody will want to follow along to see what kind of bonehead moves I'll make. I'll be sure to keep up with Instagram on my trek, and I'll be sure and do some YouTube videos. So, now I'm going to have to do some kind of bonehead move, or people are going to be disappointed, Julie.
Exactly. Okay, tell us what, everything will be in the show notes, but tell everybody what it is now on, let's do Instagram first.
So Instagram, I'm in Sacramento. Last name's Armstrong. So Instagram is just Sac Armstrong, SAC Armstrong. And my YouTube is Hike Strong, HIKE, Hike Strong on YouTube.
So listen, before we close out, I've had the greatest time. And I meant to say this at the beginning when I was introducing you. So Chris sent me an email, and I don't know if this was sarcastic or not. But Chris said, okay, I've heard you say on 3 different episodes now, you're looking for, people to be members of Jester's class of 2022 section hikers. So here I am. Okay, I'll do it. And I was like, you know what? Just because he said that, you're on. So what were...
Well, Julie, I appreciate you giving
Tell
a
me
voice.
about that email.
Well, a couple of things. One, I appreciate what you do, and I'm sure this is in some ways a selfless task or thankless task of yours. And I can't imagine the work that you have to put into this, just with what we've been through to get this to work, times, times,
right.
52 weeks a year. So, I'm very appreciative for what you do. You keep me company on my bike rides or, my running, listening to you in my headphones. So, I feel a certain responsibility to give back if I can. And I don't know that my story is all that compelling, but I think of you giving a voice to just us average, section hikers out there. We're not the glamorous, sexy through hikers. So, no, I appreciate you giving us a voice. And if I can be part of that voice, and then great.
Excellent. Well, you know what? I am going to consider us glamorous and sexy going forward. So thanks for saying that.
Great.
Well, listen, Chris, one last thing is for your section hike this summer or your lash, what are you looking forward to the most besides, having your fuel canister and things like that? What are you seeking out there or looking forward to the most?
In a word, I think just simplicity. Our lives are so complex and challenging sometimes on a day-to-day basis. And just to have that length of time, 3 weeks, however many days, just to have a simple life is really appealing to me. And, I don't get that after, on a 3 or 4 day hike. So I feel like I need, more than that. I did the Tahoe Rim Trail 2 years ago, so I got 13 days out of that. And that just spurred me on to continue with these a little bit longer, as we call them, lash hikes. And I'm really fortunate that my wife, who also likes to backpack, but she's good for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then she's ready to head back, which kind of works for both of us, because then I can have just my solo time. And I guess as a closet introvert, that's really appealing to me. And yeah, I think just the simplicity of it. I mean, the tangible things are the amazing scenery, challenging yourself physically, the coffee in the morning, those are all, very real attractions. But Julie, I think it's just having a simple day.
You know what? And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to myself as I get ready to go out and do some hiking this summer. So, well, Chris, this has been great. Thank you for working with me in my schedule. We did have to, I don't know, once or twice we moved this week what we were going to do. I can't remember at this point. But yeah, this has been great. Thanks for reaching out. And yeah, I look forward to following along. And if you'll come back on, let's have you back on in the fall and let's follow up and see how things went.
I would love it.
Excellent. All right, Chris, we'll chat soon. All
right. Thanks, Julie. Again, thanks for all you do.
Such a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Chris, and thanks for sharing your bonehead moves with all of us. I'm pretty sure we all have a few bonehead moves of our own as well. Have a great hike out there in the Sierra this summer, and we look forward to following along. I also wanted to mention that Chris spoke about a gentleman by the name of Neb Tibbetts in this episode and his website that contained a lot of information about the PCT. That website seems to be a little outdated, but he does have more up-to-date information on the Mountain Education Facebook page, and I'll add that link to that Facebook page here in this week's show notes. As we conclude this series of episodes featuring the members of Jester's class of 2022 section hikers, I wanted to say a huge thank you to those section hikers that came on the show and shared your journey with all of us, and to all of you, the listeners out there that have engaged with each episode, encouraged our class of section hikers along the way, and followed them on social media. This was a really fun series of shows to put together, and who knows, maybe there'll be a Jester's class of 2023 section hikers. Send me an email and let me know what you think. If you need to catch up on any of our 16 shows featuring Jester's class of 2022 section hikers, please check out the playlist in the show notes where you can download and listen to those specific episodes. Next week, I will be back with my co-host, Austin Wallace, as we begin sharing our journey together, making a mini-series that is centered around our favorite trail in North Carolina. Come back next week as we start to tell it all. Just a quick reminder to check out Chris's guest bio that will be directly linked to this episode on the Jester Section Hiker page, which can be found by going to thehikingradionetwork.com. You could also help support in the production of this podcast and all of our shows produced by the Hiking Radio Network by leaving us a donation while you're over there as well. You will see that donate button as you are looking at today's show notes, guest pictures, links, and Chris's bio. Thanks for listening. Be safe out there, everybody, and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way. If you ever get lost, or if the trail leads you astray, the music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word